Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name's Molly, I'm the maker behind Lefty Knits, and today I have a pretty typical podcast episode for you. So I'm coming to you from Berkeley, California, where I live with my boyfriend and our cat Lola. And as I mentioned last week in my spring inspiration video, it's still extremely chilly here in the Bay Area. So I'm still knitting pretty cold weather items. I'm wearing cowls. We'll talk about this one in a second. It's probably the coldest year I can remember, or the coldest I can remember being. Maybe it's because of my living situation, just like the apartment I live in might be the main culprit of that, the price of paying for heat, etc. But it's just, I feel like our winter, such as it is, has lasted a pretty long time, and it's been quite wet, quite windy. So even though I'm kind of starting to think about spring, it still doesn't feel like spring, even though it is. I have kind of a lot of random things to show you this week. Go ahead and grab a cup of something, grab your knitting. I'm drinking a little bit of tea right now, or mostly just holding the tea because it's very hot, but it feels nice on my hands. And let's go ahead and get started with my finished objects. So let's start off with what I'm wearing. This is the Slip Dot Cowl by Sarah Hood. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, and I made it out of Marisol Weekla yarn in the colorways Calcite and Garnet. Now, this is a discontinued yarn. It's a bulky weight alpaca and cotton yarn, and I've talked about this yarn before in my episode about yarns that I wanted to get out of my stash. I had one skein of the Garnet. It's really hard for me to remember the name of it because I don't think of Garnet as being this like bright pink. I had one skein of the Garnet that I had bought quite a while ago, thinking maybe I would use it for a hat. I don't really know what I was thinking. I think at that time I wasn't really buying yarns with a project in mind, or like with the amounts of what I needed to make things for a project in mind. I mean, so I ended up with a lot of like single skeins of things that weren't that easy to incorporate into things or whatever, and I think that I find bulky yarns to be a little bit harder in that aspect, to figure out what to do with them. I want to say I don't have the ball bands handy. I might have gotten rid of them, but in any case, I think there's a little over 100 yards per 100 gram hank. So I just, like if it's a skein of worsted, I can kind of figure it out. I wasn't even really certain though that I had enough in one skein for a cowl. So I just didn't really know what to do with it. And I kind of wanted this yarn to like be on its own. Or with another color. So essentially I found a Seller yarn loop. They're based out of Texas, and they had some of the Marisol Weekla still in stock. It is a discontinued yarn. So I decided to order this calcite color and make a 2-color colorwork cowl. Now, this pattern is really easy. It's written to just have like 2 rounds maybe of stockinette at each end, and in the middle you do this alternating pattern of knitting 1 round of your main color and then knitting a stitch with your contrast color in the next round, knitting 1 stitch with your contrast color, and then slipping the next stitch with the yarn in front, and then you offset in each round which row is the one with the slip stitches and which one is the one with the knits, to kind of get this pattern. I think this is a great pattern. I highly recommend it for beginners. It's a lot more interesting than just knitting like a long garter stitch rectangle, and because it's in the round, it's only knit, and there's this like added interest of like slipping stitches and having multiple colors, but you never have to work more than one color in a round. So it's super easy and free, which I know when I was starting out knitting again, it was pretty... For a while, I was like, I don't need to buy patterns. There's so many free patterns. And I mean, it's still a bonus when a pattern is free. Obviously, now I'm willing to spend the money to get what I want, essentially. You know, I'm already spending a good amount on the yarn. I'd rather have a pattern that I'm sure will meet my needs based on the Ravelry projects available, etc. And of course, you know, I think it's important that designers be compensated as well. So like, I have no problem paying for patterns now, but of course, when something's free and, you know, a designer is willing to put it out there for free, that's still, to me, a pretty big bonus. In terms of modifications, I think this pattern is like 84 stitches around, maybe. And I started out doing that, but it was like pretty long. Now there are two sizes. There's like a small and a large size, and the large size is like twice as big, so you could theoretically wrap it around your neck twice. I made the small size, and I actually frogged it when I had like a couple inches because I tried it on and it seemed like it was hanging pretty low. And I wanted it to be a little tighter to my neck, so I frogged it, and then I cast on 64 stitches. And I also decided to work ribbing on both the edges. I think I just did 2 rounds of ribbing on each edge. So nothing crazy. It's meant, I think, to just be stockinette and then to like curl kind of in at the edge, but I don't love the curling of stockinette. So I decided I would just add a little bit of rib. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think it is maybe the tiniest, it's probably about how I want it to be on my neck. I think I was especially worried with this because it's cotton and alpaca rather than wool. Like, you know, neither of those fibers has the same kind of memory or like elasticity as wool. So I figured it might stretch a good amount, you know, upon blocking, but I didn't necessarily expect it to go back into its original shape at any point, you know? So I figured I might as well make it kind of a little tighter than I want, try to block it relatively aggressively, and then it'll just stay there. And I think that's more or less what happened. Like when I tried on the 64 inches or 64 stitch cowl after I finished it, it was like pretty hard to get over my head, but now it's fine. It's interesting about this. Well, it's not actually that interesting, but I don't know if you can see. I don't want to take it off, I'm too cold, but I had my first sort of real problem with bleeding here. Along my cowl, there's some spots where the pink has bled into the gray, like kind of a good amount. And I shouldn't be surprised. You know, the gray is light, the pink is pretty dark, and I know like pinks and reds can bleed a lot, but I've never had this issue before. Or I've had bleeding, but it won't necessarily like bleed into the other colors. So, I mean, it's fine. I don't actually mind it that much. I think it kind of almost makes it look like variegated. I think it kind of makes the colors, I don't know, like I don't mind it that much, especially for something like this. It's fine, but I did end up going out and grabbing some color catchers after I saw how this was drying and noticed that it had bled. So warning to all of you who aren't already heeding these warnings from everyone else, when you're working with a really saturated color and a lighter color, I would say maybe especially like a red or a pink, be careful of the bleeding. Color catchers are your friend. I think I'll end up getting a good amount of wear out of this before we head into the real spring and summer. My next finished object is one that I've talked about quite a bit, so I'm not going to belabor this. This is the My Time sweater by Lily Kate France. It is knit in Scopius terrazzo and Valley Yarn Southampton. The colorways are Fontana and I believe Slate Blue, respectively. And this was my finished object last episode also, but I had not blocked it yet. I did block it between last episode and now. And it turns out the sleeves were way too long. They were like 6 inches too long. I discussed this a little bit in my spring inspiration and like patterns video, because I was working on this during that episode. So it was like 6 inches too long in the sleeve. So, and because these sleeves have like the, I still have one stitch that I haven't dropped in the sleeve, but because the sleeve stitches, the sleeves have these like this drop stitch pattern, I didn't think that I would be able to like imitate that by like basically leaving yarn in between each stitch. So I frogged the entire sleeve, both sleeves, and I re-knit them. So the way that I ended up making it shorter was like I subtracted a couple stitches here and there, at the beginning and at the end before the cuff, and I also did one fewer stitch in between each sleeve decrease than is called for in the pattern for my size. So I don't think it's giving too much away to say that it was every 5 stitches at first in the pattern, and I did it every 4. Like there's quite a bit that goes into making the sleeve. That's more than just knowing how often to decrease. So yeah, I made the second size. I reknit the sleeves, I reknit both of them, and then I had a little bit of extra yarn, so I added it to the bottom because I had knit both sleeves and then finished the body. Like I knit a few inches of body before starting the sleeves, but I knew that I was going to be tight on yarn, and after finishing the sleeves the second time, I had like a ball of yarn that I decided I would add a little bit to the body because the body wasn't like super cropped, but since this is something I wouldn't mind being work appropriate, as I've said before, I don't mind having to add a little bit of body with a shirt underneath, obviously. So I unpicked the sewn bind off, which was something I hate doing, but I did it 3 times on the sleeves too, and added in the yarn. I think you can maybe see, like I think around here, this is how much I knit. I think it was blocked above here is my guess. But either way, I added a couple inches to the body. It's 21 inches, and I think for my size, the body is meant to be 22 inches, but I'm, you know, kind of short. So it actually still is like probably a little bit, like kind of near the beginning of my hips, is where it ends. Like definitely like a few inches past my waistband. So yeah, I'm happy with it. I have a little bit of yarn left over still, but I'm gonna count all the yarn that I used originally. Like I have a ball of the terrazzo and Southampton together that's pretty small, but ultimately I think I ended up using the vast majority of the yarn that I frogged out of the sleeves, and I'm happy with this. I'll link to some other videos where I discuss this knit because I've talked about it ad nauseum, but I'll just be blocking this again to make sure that the sleeves fit. They're about like bracelet-ish length now, maybe a little shorter, but I think that they'll be fine when they block. And yeah, hopefully this remains a finished object and I'm able to wear it in a video soon. So my next finished object, this is full of hair. I'm sorry. It's full of Lola's fur, actually. So this is my last finished garment. This is the Shimmer Slipover by Apella Knits. I worked this in 2 strands of woolly knit British wool 4-ply in the colorway Forest Heather? Pine Forest Heather? Something like that. I'll make sure to link it below. And 1 strand of Knit Picks Aloft in Labyrinth. So the British wool is 100% wool, and the Labyrinth is a silk mohair blend. So this is my entry into the Best Friends Make Along by Brooke Willow Knits. And I really enjoyed this pattern. Well, I enjoyed the finished object and I enjoyed some of the knitting. So this is primarily knit flat and it's knit bottom up. So you start by casting on each side for the split hem, and you only work a little bit in the round because it has these large armholes with a twisted rib detail along them. I made the third size. I ended up using 478 yards of mohair about, so like 1 3/4 balls. And I used 1,023 yards of the woolly knit that was held together. So I only have like 26 yards of the woolly knit left. These are all that I have remaining from the woolly knit cone, which is great. I made this, and I also made my ranunculus out of it. And for both of those projects, I held the yarn double. If you're thinking about getting a woolly knit cone, just know that there's a lot of, like, you'll be able to get a lot out of it. I actually held the yarn double at both of these projects because basically this yarn is not like super next to skin soft for me. Part of the reason I decided to go for a vest, a slip over with the remaining yarn after I finished my ranunculus is that, this isn't going to be next to skin. I could have gone for something fingering weight and made the yarn go a little farther. But ultimately, like, having a fingering weight garment that I can't wear next to my skin feels a little bit, like, pointless. Just because, like, fingering weight garments are obviously lighter. But if it's lighter and I can't wear it next to my skin, then I'll just have to layer, like, under it and over it more to compensate for the fact that I'll be wearing it when I'm cold. So I decided to just go for this vest. It is a worsted weight pattern. I am not certain how my gauge ended up going with the, like, comparing to the finished or the gauge in the pattern, but I mean it fits well. It was a little bit of a pain to knit just because it is mostly knit flat, and I mean I don't really mind having like a panel on hold and knitting another panel, but at a certain point because you 3 needle bind off the shoulders closed, I had, like, you end up having 2 back panels, 2 front panels, that you then have to, like, Kitchener together or 3 needle bind off together, but you, like, have them on hold and you're trying to make sure they don't slip off the needles, and it can just be hard. And I was a little bit worried about running out of yarn. I do think that I made this to pattern with the exception of the hemline. So it was written to have a high-low split hem, and I ultimately decided I would do the split hem, but have them be the same length. So that's what I did. Otherwise, this is to pattern, and I mean, I only had this much yarn left, which I actually don't think would have been enough yarn to do the split hem different, like with a high-low hem. At least not how it's written. It's really cozy. It works really well over like a crew neck shirt or a turtleneck. This color is pretty versatile for my wardrobe, although you may have noticed I do tend to kind of like jump around the color wheel. Like, I struggle because I really like all colors and I want to wear all colors, but this like dark green does serve almost like a navy or a black, so I think that this is pretty versatile and I should be able to get a little bit of more wear out of it before it turns super warm. Highly recommend this pattern. It was easy to follow and size inclusive, and this twisted rib edge on the sleeves is knit along with the body, so I think that's an added plus, not having to go back and add sleeve ribbing, especially for something so big. So my last finished object is a little bit different. It is this bear. This is the Mini Bear by Julie Williams. It's knit in Big Twist Value from Joanne. which is 100% acrylic and like worsted or Aran weight. And then the nose color is Stylecraft Special Aran in parchment, I believe. And the brown is just, or the black nose and eyes are just some 4-ply, some black sock yarn I had laying around. So this is for my friend's son's birthday. It's his first birthday his first birthday already happened. It's his party in a couple weeks, and it's a joint party with his sister, which I'm mentioning because that will come up later. His sister's turning 3. The last time I showed you a bear project, it was the Chubbies by, I forget who the pattern is made by, but the pattern name was Chubbies, and it was also a bear, and I was also using this yarn, but I was like struggling with that pattern a little bit, so I decided that I wanted something else, and even though I kind of wanted to keep to a free pattern, I ultimately decided that I would pay for this one. Now this designer, Julie Williams, has a lot of like little stuffies like bears and rabbits, I think mostly, knit in a larger size, and then she also has like a bunch of clothes for them that you can knit, so that's kind of fun. This bear also comes with instructions to make a rabbit head instead. Obviously I did not do that. I made the bear head. It also comes with instructions to like put some clothes on the bear, like to knit in different colors so that it looks like clothes, which again I also didn't do. Now this is, I think I'll knit flat. It's been a while since I did this. I kind of sat down and like did it in a night, or like 24-ish hours, 2 nights maybe, or a night and an afternoon. And I did not particularly enjoy this. I'm absolute garbage at seaming. Especially something like this where you're trying to seam it, but it's also like stuffed with polyfill. So you're trying to like not sew the stuffing into your work, your seams and stuff. And I'm actually kind of bummed that I sewed the bear head on the wrong way. So I don't know if you can see the front seam, or the seam, the body seam right here. The head was supposed to be on the other way. I figured that out when the head was like 90% on, or maybe even fully on, and at that point I was like, I can't, if I cut this apart I'm gonna have to re-knit everything. Thought it was kind of a fun experience to knit this. I definitely don't envision myself becoming like big on crocheting or knitting toys, but I do have one more of them that I'm gonna knit, not this. But yeah, it's cute. I'm happy that I did it. He has kind of like a lopsided little face. My friend said that his room has like a forest theme, so like a bear or a fox or something would be cute. I think the pattern was well written and there was a lot of good explanation, and I don't think it was too expensive. So if you're looking for like a little toy to knit as somebody who's not big on knitting this type of thing, I would recommend this pattern. I think probably most of her other patterns are also, you know, similarly easy to follow as a somewhat advanced knitter maybe, but not one who's like super into this kind of knitting. Let's go ahead and talk about my widths. This is the Audrey's First Day cardigan by Elizabeth Smith. This is a free pattern for children, and this is being knit for the sister of the baby receiving the bear, and a sweater I've talked about in a previous episode. So this is knit in Knit Picks Snuggle Puff in Snakelet. The yarn is 70% cotton and 30% nylon, I think, and it's, I want to say 142 yards per 50 grams, but it's a blown yarn, so it is like pretty thick. Like it is a worsted or Aran weight, despite having a good amount of yardage per gram. I'm knitting the 4T size. I've knit this pattern before. I knit it in a kind of mystery old like cotton synthetic blend yarn that I received from a family friend in the D-stash, and that yarn got like weirdly discolored. Like there was some white and some like blue, and I made it like main body was white and the cuffs and the neckline, which I have yet to add to this one, I made in blue. And the white yarn got like weirdly discolored. And at first my boyfriend and I thought it might be because it was like in our living area while we were cooking. But we're not like, I mean, I block a lot of stuff out there and that never happens. So I'm not really certain why it discolored. Maybe it's just because it's old. I think I'll probably end up, I haven't frogged that sweater yet, but I probably will end up frogging it, knitting that yarn into something else, and then doing a little bit of dye experimentation with some RIT or something. In any case, I liked the pattern. I decided I wanted to knit it again. So I went ahead and made this. And I've knit both the sleeves. I just have to pick up the button band and add that on. Now this yarn is fun. It's very soft. I think it kind of has, it has like an interesting texture. It's my first time working with a blown yarn, and like the stitches don't look super even, which I think is, you know, just kind of the effect that this yarn might have. My swatch blocked a little bit weird, but I did use needles, I think a size or two bigger than what I ended up deciding to use for this. Now, this is a pattern that doesn't have a schematic, so like it gives you like a chest circumference of the finished garment, but it doesn't tell you like how long the sleeves are and stuff, which I wasn't certain that my row gauge was correct. And that made the sleeves a little bit harder because it tells you, you know, like knit X number of stitches and then do a decrease. So I ended up using the flax pattern by Tin Can Knits to kind of get a feel for how long the sleeves on this should be. I think I ended up erring on the side of having them be a little bit longer, but I ended up decreasing at kind of a different rate based on what I was seeing in that pattern and the finished stitch count that, and the number of decreases that this sweater was supposed to have. So that's just something to note about the pattern. I think it's a great pattern. It's, you know, easy to understand. Like I said, it's free, which I find especially appealing when I'm gift knitting. So I would recommend it. I just think, and maybe like if you have your own kid and you're like measuring the sleeves against your own child, it's a little bit easier. But since I don't have that, I kind of had to like read and guess. They might be a little long, but I figure they can just be cuffed for a while, and kids grow and change, you know, they're always growing and changing, so it should be fine. I got little butterfly buttons to put on this one. I have another set of these. I had a couple of choices for buttons for this sweater, and I asked my friend what she thought her daughter would want, and her daughter has requested the butterflies. I made a cardigan for that family that had like little fish buttons that went over very well, so fun buttons are a priority. I think it'll be very cute to have these little butterflies on here when I finish. My second and final whip is kind of a bummer for me. This is the Be Thankful cardigan by Lily Kate France. I'm knitting it in Knit Picks Wool of the Andes tweed in the colorway Wellies. I messed up with this. I've made this pattern before. I made it in the British Wool 4-ply. I enjoy this pattern. It is bottom up, which is actually part of where I ran into this problem, but I figured that I would have enough yarn. So I made it out of a 400-gram cone of the British Wool, and I did have to make some modifications. I made the smallest size, even though I probably should be knitting size like 3 based on my bust measurement. I made the sleeves kind of short and I like tapered them much more than the pattern calls for. And this time I ordered 400 yards of this yarn, but I think it has like a little bit more yardage per gram, and I thought I would be okay. So I ended up knitting the size 2, which is still small, I think, compared to the recommended ease, but you know, obviously a little bit bigger on me. I think it's like a 44 inch bust, something like that on this sweater, but I ran out of yarn basically. So I knit the body to pattern. I added the cuff or the cuff, the button band. I have the spot where all the buttonholes are, denoted here. It's all ready. I knit one sleeve and I did do some tapering. It still became clear that I was going to run out of yarn. Fine, no big deal. I'll just order more. So I did. I ordered one more skein, which should be more than enough. I think I'll probably only need 10 to 20 extra grams. I have, I think, a ball and a tiny bit, but the sleeves took, 70 or 80 grams, so I'm just gonna fall just short. I ordered some other yarn, some other things, and I've been waiting on them for over a month at this point, because I put in my old address, which is so dumb. Obviously that's my own fault. I put in my old address and I didn't realize until the day it was supposed to be delivered. It went out for delivery on March 14th. And it very promptly went from out for delivery to forwarded. So I got an alert on the tracking that it was being forwarded. And then I was like, why is it being forwarded? And I realized I'd put my old address in, not this current one. And I'm not quite sure how I managed that, because I've already sent things here from Knit Picks. I had a big Knit Picks order that included this snakelet and the rest of this wool of the Andes that got to this house or our apartment. But I did. So, I have mail forwarding set up. It should get here eventually, but it's been forwarding since the 14th of March. It is now April as I record this, and I still haven't received it. And it hasn't shown anything else on the tracking. It just says forwarded. I'm trying not to buy another skein of the yarn. It's really hard for me to resist, but it's I already spent this money. I have contacted the post office, which was kind of difficult, and they ended up calling me and being it's already forwarding. And I was yeah, I know, but do you know when it's coming? And they were no, we don't. Soon, I think is what he said to me. And again, I know that this is my mistake, but I only moved a mile and a half away, and there are different zones in Berkeley, I think, in terms of where the mail gets sent to be delivered, but it's it feels it's stuck in purgatory somewhere, and I believe it's out there. I've kind of just been hoping that it would either come to me, that I would at least see on the tracking that something was changing, that it would get sent back to Knit Picks, that something would happen so that I had recourse to do something. I think it's been about a week since I talked to them, the post office people. So I might put in another request in a few days. Again, this is all starting because this all started because I made a mistake. But I was hoping I could just quickly order a little bit more yarn and get the yarn I needed to make the sleeve. But that didn't happen, and I'm starting to kind of forget what I did for the sleeve. I did take notes, so hopefully it'll be okay. I'm frustrated at myself mostly. I'm frustrated at the post office. I'm annoyed that I tried multiple times to submit inquiries on the site and it didn't really work. And then I finally found somewhere to submit it and got a call that was basically just it's already forwarding and it'll come soon. But it doesn't seem like that person had eyes on the package or anything. This knit is in purgatory until something happens to that yarn box, or until I cave and buy more. But I'm working on a budget here. I don't want to cave, but maybe I'll start the sleeve and just sort of get myself moving here, because I just would really like to have this cardigan. I think it's fun. I like the tweed. I already don't really remember how I did this, and I'd like to not forget more. Like I said, this is a pattern I've knit before. I really like it. I feel like this experience is giving me a little bit of pause with bottom-up sweaters, just because if I didn't knit it bottom up, I would have had enough yarn. I would have been able to work it out, but unfortunately... And I could probably frog this sleeve and make this sleeve more tapered and kind of deal with it that way, but I'd prefer not to. But yeah, this is a fun pattern, just as with most bottom-up pieces. Like, maybe buy that extra like skein or hank to make sure that you have enough so that you don't run into like this dumb situation that I'm in right now. I do have buttons though, at least. These are Dritz recycled hemp buttons. They are 20 millimeters. I think the pattern calls for like 17 or 18 or something like that. I got them from Joann. I did have to order them. They came in like a 9-pack, I think. So 9 buttons, three pack. I think that they match the vibe of the sweater very well, and I'm excited to use them whenever I'm able to block this sweater and sew them on. So in terms of acquisitions, I have something, I guess. So I got this Woolstock Light from Blue Sky Woolstock Light from Blue Sky Fibers. Now, this I talked about in my last podcast. Well, I realized on camera that I had accidentally received the worsted Woolstock instead of the light. So I was able to email them. The people at Yarn Loop, they very kindly sent me this 2 of these. I sent back the Woolstock and they sent me these. Great customer service. I definitely recommend them. This is the colorway Wild Time, and this is a 50-gram hank with 218 yards, and it's 100% fine Highland wool. This is going to become a hat for my boyfriend. I have 2 of these. I think I might have already said that. Otherwise, I'll just talk a little bit about, I guess, my plans and what else I've been up to. So I'm going to be participating in the Summer Top Knit-Along. I think it's the Summer Top. Spring top? I should know. But I'm participating in the knit along that Iris makes. Iris is running. I'm planning on making her lotus petal top, and it is a fingering weight tee with like a little petally design at the bottom hem. I haven't decided what yarn I'll use, and I don't think, I'm looking at my stash right now, I don't think I have anything that would be appropriate for that, because of, like, I tend to either buy fingering weight yarn for something or in like single skein quantities, and I need 2 for this. I have some ideas, but I'm trying to figure it out. I might make a couple other tops of hers. There's a lot of patterns that she's made that are great, so I'll link her page and then knit along below just in case you're interested. In terms of what's coming up next, I have talked about my spring makes, and I think my next cast on will be the Lakes Pullover by Ozetta in this yarn I have here. This is Knit Picks Upcycle Reserve worsted in Amarillo. It's 100% wool. Like I said, it's still cold here. I'm probably gonna get some wear out of it. I think it'll knit up pretty fast. So that's probably what I'll cast on when I finish this sweater. I think that'll be my next cast on. Otherwise, I have been spinning again. So this is my drop spindle from Snyder Spindles. It has this fun geometric design at the top. It's light, it spins very fast and very well. This fiber is corriedale from BCB Fibers, which is a relatively local maker to me. They're up in Marin County in California. This is it's super soft. It's spinning up pretty well, I would say. It's only the second like fiber I've tried. The first was the Wool of the Andes roving from Knit Picks, which I also found to spin pretty well. And I am extremely close to getting an EEW 6.0 from Dreaming Robots. Like so close. Because I've really been enjoying spinning. Drop spindling I don't hate. I like it. But it takes a long time. I think I would like a spinning wheel or an e-spinner. And given the space that we have and the price, I think an e-spinner is going to make sense for me. So I'm trying to hold out until I spin a little bit more. I think that this is like an ounce maybe. And I'd like to kind of try to ply it. Like I think I want to spin this much again, but I might get lazy or impatient, I guess, and just kind of spin this out and then, you know, wind it onto Probably I'll wind it onto paper towel rolls as my poppins, or maybe I'll wind a center pull ball, although I've read that's not ideal, but I'll do something so that I can ply this. And then I think maybe once I've plied it or started applying it, I will think about ordering that EW 6.0. The Dreaming Robots e-spinners have been kind of talked about quite a bit in the circles that I tend to frequent in terms of knitting podcasts. Young Folk Knits recently reviewed the EW 6.0. The Knitting PT has been talking about her Nano, which is a smaller version of the e-spinner. And I just didn't realize that there were e-spinners like at this price point. E-spinners appeal to me because of the size and, you know, nature of it. I don't mind the idea of treadling, but I think I was like, it might be nice to kind of focus on drafting as opposed to, since I'm still like kind of new, as opposed to like treadling and drafting and like paying, you know, having it be like a whole body experience, especially given the amount of space and like the life that I currently have. But most e-spinners I've seen are like really expensive, but the Dreaming Robot spinners are like in the like $100 to $300 price point, which is cheaper than you can get at least a new spinning wheel. But yeah, I've been seeing more makers using their Dreaming Robots e-spinners. And who was the last one? Stitches and Starlight was the last one who recently did an episode. I'm like really inspired to get into spinning. I'm waiting, you know, in part to do a little bit more spinning on my drop spindle. I'm also waiting because I'm trying to finish some of my grad school work before I fall down that rabbit hole. Spinning is something you might be seeing a little bit more around here. I think I said that last time. When I bought this fiber, when I had ordered the spindle, I have another drop spindle that I got from Knit Picks that's like much heavier than the one that I'm using now. And I think this one has been a good weight. I think especially as a beginner, Snyder spindles I would recommend. I'm happy with this one. I think it's pretty and fun. They make a lot of different designs. Let's see if we really get deep into the spinning. I suspect we will. So that's all I have for you here today. I hope you enjoyed hearing my rambly chats about all the things that I've been working on recently. I'd love to hear what you've been working on. Please drop me a line down below and tell me what your recent projects have been. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. I post videos 2 to 3-ish, I'll say, Fridays a month, talking about my knitting inspiration, my recent knits, pattern ideas, etc. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.